Just how wild can these kids get? Well, just look at them. They put their little sister on a seesaw. And there's a boiling pot right next to her. In this house, wrecking the place is just normal. Most people hire a nanny to make life easier. This family hires one like it's an extreme challenge. They went through 17 nannies in just 2 weeks. The dad is a man named Brown 13. After his wife died, he had to raise 7 kids by himself. And every single one of them is a professional troublemaker. They've messed up almost everything in the house. Even the toughest nanny couldn't last long. This time, the kids had trashed the kitchen again. 13 was furious. But he had no choice. He still had to work, so he needed a nanny. Once again, he went to the local nanny agency. But the boss took one look at 13. And turned him down immediately. His family was just too much to handle. At this rate, the agency's reputation would be ruined too. Meanwhile, the kids were already looking for their next target. This time, they picked Xiaojun, the chef who was terrified of mice. First, they used a toy mouse to scare her. When Xiaojun realized something was wrong, the kids were already behind her. One frying pan to the head. And she was out cold. When Xiaojun woke up, she was tied to the table. And the kitchen was completely wrecked. The kids claimed they were just making dinner for dad. They even threw a bunch of weird stuff into the pot. 13 saw the mess. And completely lost hope. He told E, the maid, if they couldn't find someone to control these kids, they'd destroy the whole house sooner or later. Just then, someone knocked on the door. A very unusual looking woman was standing outside. Her name was Nanny McPhee. She was sent by the government to help single-parent families. She didn't want a salary. All she asked for was Sunday afternoon off. 13 was still trying to process all this. When McPhee had already started working, she walked into the kitchen and ordered the kids to stop. Then she made them clean up the kitchen and go to bed. But the kids didn't listen at all. They kept messing around. McPhee didn't waste another word. She pulled a cane from under her cloak and slammed it on the floor. And something magical happened. The kids suddenly lost control of their bodies. They were forced to repeat the same actions over and over. McPhee told them the spell would stop if they admitted they were wrong. But the oldest kid still refused. He wouldn't apologize. So the kids kept messing around. They even put the youngest girl on the seesaw. And right beside her was a boiling pot. Things were getting dangerous fast. The kids finally panicked. Even the oldest kid had to admit defeat. McPhee slammed her cane down again. A cloud of smoke filled the kitchen. When the smoke cleared, all 7 kids were perfectly fine. And the entire kitchen was spotless. The kids were completely stunned. This time, they had no choice but to go to bed. But they clearly weren't ready to give up. After the lights went out, they secretly planned their next attack. The next morning, McPhee came to wake them up. But the kids had already prepared their next trick. They covered their faces in flour and painted fake chickenpox all over themselves. They pretended to be too sick to get out of bed. Their plan was simple. Annoy McPhee until she quit. But she wasn't fooled for a second. McPhee pulled out her cane again and tapped it on the floor. Magic happened once more. The kids suddenly couldn't move. It was like they were glued to their beds. No matter how hard they struggled, they couldn't get up. Soon after, McPhee brought out a bottle of black liquid. She made the oldest kid drink it first. Then the others had to follow. One by one, the kids swallowed the strange potion. But McPhee wasn't done yet. She made Xiaojun collect all the scraps the kids had thrown around the kitchen. Then she made one giant pot of stew out of them. Soon, the awful-looking stew was served at the table. The kids stared at the food. None of them knew what to do. That night, their aunt came over to clean the house. She saw how hungry the kids were. But there was nothing she could do. She wasn't allowed to interfere with McPhee's methods. The kids were starving. So they finally asked her for some decent food. Just then, 13 came home from work. He immediately noticed the kids had changed. McPhee was pleased too. She tapped her cane once more and lifted the spell. At the same time, one of the moles on her face disappeared. But 13's problems were only getting started. That day, 13's Aunt Shibata came to visit. She was also the kids' great-aunt. And the moment she showed up, 13 remembered something important. Shibata had already given him an ultimatum. If he didn't get married within a month, she would cut off his financial support. The family depended on that money to survive. So if 13 wanted to keep the family together, he had no choice but to start looking for a wife. But Shibata didn't come just to pressure him into marriage. She also planned to take one of the 7 kids away. She claimed it would make things easier for 13. But really, she wanted someone to take care of her when she got old. The kids obviously refused. They decided none of them would leave. So they started plotting to get Shibata out of the house. They knew her eyesight was bad. And her hearing wasn't great either. So they dressed Juliet up like a fancy little lady. Shibata put on her glasses and studied her for several minutes. But she didn't recognize her at all. Then the kids brought out the family dog and chickens. And finally, they went after the donkey Shibata had left at their house. They even put a hat on the donkey's head. Shibata completely lost her temper. Just when things were about to get out of control, McPhee arrived. She tapped her cane again. And the donkey suddenly changed. It stood up like a person and started dancing. Shibata was absolutely delighted. She thought the donkey was a beautiful little girl. She even decided to take her home. But McPhee's magic only lasted until 8 that night. If Ciabatta really took the donkey home, the spell would wear off, and 13 would be finished. At that moment, E stepped forward. She decided to take the blame for the kids. And she left with Ciabatta. She wasn't even related to the family. But she made the most selfless choice of all. For the first time, the kids understood what family really meant. Being family wasn't about saying you knew what was best. It was about standing up for someone when things got tough. But 13 still had a problem. He had to get married soon. There wasn't enough time to fall in love. So he asked a coworker to set him up with someone. Soon, they found Selma. She had always struggled to find a husband. But the moment she heard about 13's connection to the Ciabatta family, she immediately agreed to meet him. The day of the blind date finally arrived. Selma showed up dressed in an incredibly flashy outfit. The kids took one look at her, and knew exactly what she was after. She wasn't interested in 13. She wanted his money and status. If she became their stepmother, their lives would be miserable. So once again, the kids started plotting. This time, their goal was simple. Ruin the date. The two of them sat down in the living room, and the date officially began. 13 brought out a plate of desserts. But he had no idea. The kids had already tampered with them. Selma didn't notice a thing. She started eating like she hadn't seen food in days. Then she wanted another piece. 13 quickly offered her a different drink. But something strange came pouring out. When they opened the container, a giant toad jumped out. And then, a pig suddenly dropped from the ceiling. 13 was completely stunned. Selma was furious. She stormed out of the house. The kids thought their plan had worked. But the problem wasn't over yet. They went back to McPhee, and asked her to stop the marriage with magic. But McPhee refused. She could control the kids. But she couldn't control adult relationships. Some things simply had to happen naturally. Before long, the wedding day arrived. And Selma finally showed her true colors. She grabbed the keepsake. That belonged to the youngest child's mother. The kids finally realized. She was absolutely not fit to be their mother. Then Ciabatta arrived for the wedding. The moment Selma saw her, she completely changed her attitude. She immediately started flattering the woman with the money. And then, E came back. She was wearing a beautiful blue dress. She looked completely different from before. When she saw 13 about to get married, she congratulated him, and quietly stood to the side. The wedding finally began. The kids knew they couldn't let this woman stay in their family, so they decided to make one final big move. At the wedding, the kids suddenly pretended there were bees everywhere. Everyone panicked. Even the priest lost control. In the chaos, he accidentally knocked the wedding cake onto the bride. Selma completely snapped. She grabbed the cake and threw it right back. Unfortunately, it landed straight on Ciabatta's face. The wedding instantly turned into a full-on cake fight. The whole place descended into chaos. In the end, Selma was kicked out of the house. The kids had gotten rid of the bad woman, but they had also destroyed 13's last chance to save the family. Ciabatta decided to cut off their financial support. Once again, the family was pushed to the edge. That's when the kids finally understood something. Every choice comes with consequences. And then, they realized something even more important. 13 had always been in love with E. So this time, the kids didn't play another prank. They didn't try to solve everything with magic. Instead, they told the truth. They brought 13 and E together. 13 finally admitted how he felt, and E stopped running from her feelings. The wedding that started as a complete mess finally became a real wedding. And this broken family finally came back together. Then, after one final tap of her cane, McPhee's appearance completely changed. She was no longer ugly. She was no longer strange. She looked gentle and beautiful. But McPhee wasn't the one who had truly changed. It was the kids. They finally learned what responsibility meant. And they finally understood what love meant. The chaotic family had finally become whole again. In the end, McPhee quietly left. There was no big goodbye. No dramatic farewell. Because once the kids needed her, but no longer depended on her, her job was done.